All right, so welcome to today's live lesson. We've been looking at a lot of past paperwork, and today I want to look at it again because, it's sort of roughly exam time for some students. Don't worry if you're not in exam time, but for a lot of students it is. So I just want to go through past papers as a means of helping students who are preparing to write. But even if you're not preparing to write, you're going to learn something, okay? So don't worry about it. It is all a learning process. You will benefit in some way. Okay, so I'm gonna just share my screen. We're gonna look at 3, good. We're gonna share that. Okay, excellent. So let me move me up here in the corner and we'll get started here. So yet again, I am looking at the example candidate responses, so that we can see the kinds of things that students struggle with, where they do well, what the examiner wants from you when you write a particular type of paper or a particular type of question. Remember, we've been looking at paper 3. We've been looking at directed writing. We've been looking at composition. Last week we looked at composition, but specifically we looked at argumentative and discursive writing. But today we're going to focus on the nice stuff. Descriptive and narrative writing. Okay. And let me just put the chat box up here so I can see you all. Excellent. Oh, don't worry about being late. I'm just glad you're here. And thank you for joining us. I'm glad everybody's saying hi in the chat box. Brilliant. I've got a record of your names, so that's fantastic. Let's move on with the descriptive and narrative writing. So some of this you'll have seen from last week. For those of you that are new, you can read through this for yourselves, what examiners look for in these kinds of papers, the composition section. And then, like I said, last week we looked at argumentative and discursive writing. We looked at 2 different answers to those, or maybe even 3, can't remember. But today we're going to focus on descriptive writing. We're going to look at one piece of descriptive writing, and we'll try our best to look at 2 pieces of narrative writing. But if we don't get through it all, doesn't matter. The main thing I wanted to point out to you is the differences between descriptive writing and a narrative writing, which, remember, the story, the word narrative relates to the idea of story. Just be aware that there is crossover between story writing and descriptive writing. Stories contain descriptions, right? And sometimes descriptive pieces will be a story of some kind. However, the story mustn't be more developed, or there shouldn't be too much focus on the story as there is on description of events, right? So that's the subtle difference that goes on there. Let's have a look at some of the answers that people have been given for these 2 sections. Oh, maybe it'd be nice to actually read the question. Yes, that would be good. Okay, so I'm sorry. Descriptive writing, 3A. First choice between 2. Describe a time and place, real or imaginary, when you felt trapped. Concentrate on your surroundings and your feelings at the time, because descriptive writing is all about settings, your surroundings, the setting, and feelings, because feelings are linked to the senses. If your senses are overwhelmed by something, you will have a certain feeling about it. So that is what descriptive writing does. It focuses on this idea of your setting and your feelings / senses. Okay. Then number B, which we're not going to look at today, so I'll just cross it out, but just for interest's sake, it would have been, you come across a group of people eating and speaking together around a table. Describe how they reveal their personalities, relationships, and emotions. So I didn't find a sample of this one, so we're not going to look at that. But we are going to try and look at the next 2 narrative writing options, number A. And here you're given a quote to start your story with. As they looked in the mirror, they were amazed to find 2 completely different people smiling back at them. Use this sentence as the beginning of a story. Interesting, okay? Or B, write a story in which the central theme is flying. This is very broad, very open, and sometimes it's harder actually when you're not really given too much focus, because there's so many things you could talk about. So although you think that might be a nice option to go for, watch out. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's go and have a look at some of the sample responses. Okay, so you can read this for yourselves about how they mark you, but essentially this second part that we're going to focus on is you get 12 for style and you get, let me just see here, questions here. Yeah, you get 13 for content and structure. Remember the way, what your ideas what your ideas are and how you order them, how you put them across. And then 12 for style and accuracy, grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, etc. Okay. So you can have a close look at that for yourselves. Here's the table which shows you the different bands that they will mark you for in terms of this content and structure. And so we'll be focusing on these two bands today. Read that for yourselves, please, if you get a chance. Very important to see how you are marked. And here's the second part for style and accuracy, your grammar, the way you write. Okay, now let's go on to our first answer, our first sample answer. Now this was 3A, okay, and the question was, remember, it was a descriptive essay, and it says, describe a time and place, real or imaginary, when you felt trapped. Okay, so this is a very central idea to this question. Concentrate on your surroundings and your feelings. Let's see if this student has done that. So, this is all about somebody in a wartime setting, as you will see. So I'm going to try and see if I can just make it a bit bigger for ease of reading. Mud, deep, thick mud. It surrounded me, it stifled me, there was no way out. Isn't that an interesting opening? Let's see what this person got. They got a grade A. So they did well, okay? They got a grade A. So let's see. I think this opening, it strikes you straight away. Mud, what an interesting word to open up a description with. And it's something you're describing. It's mud, it's deep, it's thick. It surrounded me, it stifled me, there was no way out. This sense of feeling trapped is already evoked in that opening few sentences. Okay? Or specifically this part of the sentence. The trench was slowly filling up with stagnant water. Already we have the use of adjectives. Very, very important in descriptive writing. But it's not only adjectives that are important, it's also descriptive phrases, how you describe things, not necessarily just the use of adjectives. So that also creates an effect. Okay? So, it was slowly filling up with stagnant water, filling my already soaking boots, seeping through into my trench foot, ridden feet, mucking me, giving me no chance to run. So we have settings, surroundings. He's in a trench, there's mud. He's got trench foot, which was a common ailment during especially the First World War in the trenches. Okay, so we know exactly where this speaker is situated, the writer. Giving me no chance to run. Once again, linking to this idea of being trapped. Very clever. The crimson clay, what a beautiful adjective. The crimson clay floor lay waiting below me. The blood of my comrades flowing through. Look at this waiting below me. Isn't that interesting? It means he's going to join the blood of his comrades, okay? The blood of my comrades flowing through, begging me to join, to be the next lucky soul to be dead. Here's some irony. Lucky soul to be dead. Is that lucky? Actually, in this case, it is. Okay. So let me just write that out. This is irony. Okay. To end this hell. Okay, so he's describing the war, the situation in the trenches as a hell. What kind of device is being used here? Can anybody spot it? What device is this that's being used? Figurative language is what I'm talking about. Can anybody see it? Okay, let me leave that there and move on. Good, yes, yay. A metaphor, you're absolutely right. Good. It's a metaphor. Yes, good, guys, metaphor. Because he's not saying this is like hell, which would be a simile. No, he's sort of subtly or indirectly suggesting something that this is hell, okay? The trenches are not a pleasant place to be. It is full of death, decay, okay? And yes, he probably has a desire to want to stop this hell, to end this hell. In other words, to actually, you know, to be killed, because then he wouldn't have to live through this. All right, good. So let's just type it, let's just write metaphor here, or scroll it, metaphor. Okay. I had gotten used to the smell of odor and bad feet there's a spelling error, a long time ago. But there was a new smell that hung in the air, a dank, dark smell. Now look at that use of alliteration to emphasize this heavy smell. It's dank, it's dark, and that D sound makes it sound heavy. It's oppressive, okay? So that's how alliteration works. Remember, you don't just want to point out a device or some form of figurative language. You want to show what effect it creates. And that's what it's doing. It's emphasizing that oppression. But only a man devoid, clever, continuing this use of D, a beautiful word. We don't really use it often. Devoid of all hope can smell. Okay, so this is a dank, dark smell that only a man devoid of all hope can smell. Fear. Okay, so what is he ultimately feeling? Because he's sort of talked about the trench foot and everything. Now he's focusing on something specific. Fear, repetition, good. Emphasizing just how oppressive it is. Fear clung to me like a weeping child. Brilliant use of a simile, because what clings to you? A weeping child will certainly be clinging to you. So very nice. And it's not just a child, it's a weeping child, emphasizing sadness. There is nothing to be happy about in this situation. So fear clung to me like a weeping child in those last few hours of my life, and it overcame me. I broke down in great tears, the salty drops giving a reassuring tang to my mouth. And as I lay huddled, so in my tomb, once again, another metaphor. This is not a trench. This is a tomb. He knows he's going to die. He knows the situation is impossible, the situation he has found himself in. There is no way out. So he's lying huddled in his tomb. The dark veil of death covered me like a shroud. Okay. What is a shroud? What is a shroud? Do you know? Okay, tell me what a shroud is. But I just also want to mention fog. Okay, interesting. Yes, fog acts like a shroud as well, because fog covers things. Good, but it's not quite what a shroud is. I know what you want to say. I know there's definitely a comparison to be had between fog and a shroud, but a shroud is an item that's very specific. No, it's not mist. It's not fog or mist, but I know why you want to say that, because they're both coverage. So thank you for trying. Good, it's a cloth. Okay, so good. At least you have an idea, this idea of being covered, smothered, whatever it might be. But actually a shroud, yes, is something that in some cultures, nice point, that we use to cover dead people. A cloth for covering dead people. Yes, good. So it is like a cloth. Cloth for the dead in some cultures. Good for pointing that out. Very nice. So interesting. He is playing on this imagery of death. Yes, good. Yes, covering dead people. Excellent. So you see, it's a dark veil of death covered me like a shroud. Okay, so probably from the way you can see that I get so excited about this writing so far is that any marker would probably have the same reaction. And so we know that this student has a good control of language. The fact that they can produce something like this in a time limit is quite amazing. Using this kind of language, they are well read, they've got good vocabulary, they know how to create images, they've looked at metaphors, they've looked at similes, they're probably used to using them in their assignments. So this is the kind of thing I want you to aim for when you're writing something creative. Be as masterful about language as you possibly can. And this is quite amazing that this person was able to do this, and it's because they're well read. So read a lot. Okay, all right, so like a shroud, let's continue. My legs suddenly, always nice to use some adverbs to create tension. Suddenly, quickly, slowly, agonizingly, etc. Okay, my legs suddenly felt warm. I had urinated myself like a small child. Once again, pulling on this image of vulnerability. Children are vulnerable. A small child, a weeping child. So he feels like he's returned to some sort of form of vulnerability in a sort of childlike way. And then there's a sense of realism. Okay, when people are stressed, they urinate, okay? So I had urinated myself like a small child, adding a sense of realism. Sorry, I've written realize instead of realism, forgive me. The smell hit me and instantly I sobered. Okay, come back to reality. I looked down at my dark green uniform, covered in mud, and remembered my purpose. Might be a bit of irony here. With a sudden surge of confidence, reinforcing this confidence, I sought to relinquish my deep cave of dark emotion, more metaphors here, and relinquish, what a beautiful word, to give up, to relinquish my deep cave of dark emotion and peer over the top. Okay, and this was something that commonly happened in the trenches. This person obviously knows about warfare. You would look over the top to see where the enemy was, what the status was of the battle, and immediately the chatter of guns. Chatter. What is this? What device is being used here? And here I'm going to be testing your spelling as well. No, don't worry about the spelling. It's okay. Tell me what this is. Do you know what this is? The chatter of guns. What is that? So let me read the sentence. Immediately, the chatter of guns sparked to life, and I dived back down again. I had been hit in the shoulder. So he's gone up, he's had a look, and obviously the spies on the other side see him, and then they shoot at him. And yes, it's guns being fired. Yes, that's exactly what it's relating to. The chatter of guns sparked to life. Yes, but what kind of device is it? What sort of figurative language is it? That's what I'm looking for. Yes, good. Onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia. Now remember, with onomatopoeia, you want to spell the word poem, but then you just don't put the M on the end, and instead you have "ia" at the end. Onomatopoeia. Okay? And yeah, don't worry if you didn't spell it right, but good. I'm just glad that you are recognizing this. Very good. And yes, it means they were trying to fire at them with their guns, this chattering. You can hear it almost, okay? That's what onomatopoeia does. Onomatopoeia is the sound of the word almost reflects the action that is being made, this shooting of the guns. Okay. So that's how devices work. They emphasize things. They create a stronger sense of imagery. And the fact that it wasn't just the solitary shot of a gun, bang. No, it was chatter. It was chattering. It's almost as if he's been overwhelmed by all this shooting. It shows you that death is pretty much inescapable here. It shows you how overwhelmed and vulnerable these poor soldiers were on both sides. Okay? So also just this idea of the soldiers waiting to shoot at any little movement whatsoever. They must also be at the edge of their nerves, living in fear on both sides. It's not a pleasant surrounding. Oh dear, I really am taking too much time on this. Okay. I'm going to try and just read through the rest of this and stop analyzing it, because I want you to get an idea. I want you to get an idea of the kinds of things a student wrote and why they got it. A paradox of pain swept through me, and I wished for all the world to die. I wished to embrace death as an old friend and let him lead me away from my prison entrapment. But I was not so lucky, or I was not to be so lucky. There's a word missing there. I lay trapped in my muddy hell, the world swimming before me. I could make out the sound of heavy machinery roaring into life, and the deep barks of soldiers everywhere, shouting and yelling over the noise. Men were everywhere. Men in gray uniforms. The enemy. Short, sharp sentence, showing him that they're being overwhelmed by the enemy. A strong smell. Once again, the senses being brought in. Okay, so the setting, the senses, a strong smell of metal hit me, and I knew straight away it was the smell of old blood. I had fallen into a puddle of it, mixed with water. The liquid ran over me as I started to gasp for air, showing struggle. I felt claustrophobic, beautiful word for another word for being trapped. Claustrophobic and trapped. Panic hit me, and I lashed out through the puddle, kicking, punching, and cursing. This list of 3 powerful verbs, or strong verbs, showing his desperation. and his shock. I felt betrayed by my own people. My country didn't care about us. The endless deaths that occurred meant nothing to the heartless villains. Interesting. The walls of mud seemed to close in on me, getting smaller and smaller. Look at being trapped, taking away my longed for air, beautiful hyphenation there, and I swam in and out of consciousness. So he didn't just go in and out of consciousness, he swam in and out of consciousness. A low whine started, getting louder and louder. It was a cluster bomb. As I opened my lead-like eyes, so his eyes are so heavy and weary, I saw it. My savior, there's a spelling error. I was calm. The whistle became intolerable. Then it hit. So kind of ending on a cliffhanger. Did he survive? Did he die? Well, he wrote this, so maybe he survived, but actually it's also just a description of being somewhere, so could have died, all right? But please note the focus on feelings and surroundings, using the senses. Yes, there is a bit of story. He's in a trench, he stands up, he gets shot, he falls in a puddle. It's not really a story, there's no plot per se, but it is a very vivid description of things going on around him. And that's why there is a bit of crossover. Can you see it? There's a crossover between descriptive and narrative writing, but the focus is not on the story. The focus is on what is going on around him and his impressions. Okay, so let's see what the examiner said. This is a powerful response as it evokes the sense of being trapped in both a physical and emotional way as the soldier hears the enemy coming, yet desires to escape from the horrors surrounding him. Although it has a narrative structure, there is a strong descriptive focus throughout. The details are immediate and powerful at times, such as fear clung to me like a weeping child, and the deep barks of soldiers everywhere. The climax is extremely well handled and works well as a release from the buildup of tension and horrific surroundings. So in terms of content, this person did very well. They got a 12, which is excellent. It's a band 1, okay. The sense of audience is strong throughout. So who are you directing this writing to? Can they understand what you're saying? Do you keep a sense of some kind, some sort of coherency for your audience? Okay, so the sense of audience is strong throughout, although in a bid to keep a continuum of detail and emotion, to keep a sense of continuity, there are a couple of instances of sentence control errors. So there should have been some semicolons somewhere. There could have been some ellipses. There could have been commas. Those were missed out. You know, when you are struggling for time in an exam and you already thought up all these amazing ideas, it's quite hard to get everything right. But that is why you have to just practice. So they got 10, which is a band 2. Can I just check very, very quickly while we're here? Yeah, it's band 2. The writing is mostly fluent, sometimes linguistically effective and largely accurate, may have some sense of audience. Looks for signs of a developing style. I have to, as the marker, I have to look for signs of a developing style and some ability to express shades of meaning, nuance, little details that hint at things, relinquish, devoid. These are all subtle choices of vocabulary that say something about situation. And then let's just see. Oh, I've got 4 minutes. I don't know if I want to rush through the next part. It might be better if I continue, if we can look more closely at the narrative writing next week, okay? Because I just won't have time to go into it properly, which is what I'd want you to. So I hope that's okay with you guys. Let's look at how this writer did, he or she did in terms of the content. They got a 12 out of 13. I mean, that is amazing. But do you see what you'd have to produce just to get that 12? Never mind a 13. With creative writing, they mark strictly. You have got to be so creative, so controlled. So it's a good idea. If you're going to write either of these 2 kinds of things, you got to really practice it, okay? And read. If you're not so good at this kind of thing, rather go for the argumentative discursive, because at least there's a structure you can follow. It's kind of logical and ordered. All right. Let's have a quick look. Why did they get this 12. Well, there are many well-defined, well-developed ideas and images describing complex atmospheres with a range of details. Okay, yeah, so they did this very well. They created this complex atmosphere, which was great. Overall structure is provided through devices, figurative devices, such as the movements of the writer, the creation of a short time span. Okay, it's not figurative, it's just devices in general, writing devices. So movements of the writer, the creation of a short time span, or the creation of atmosphere or tension. There is no confusion with writing a story. Okay? There was not a story, even though there were things that happened. Repetition is avoided. What is meant by that is not necessarily phrases that are repeated. Fear. No, it's more about I'm in the mud. I'm in the mud. I'm in the mud. That kind of thing. Where developed ideas are continuously repeated. That's frowned upon because it means you can't think of anything else to say. Repetition is avoided, and the sequence of sentences makes the picture clear to the reader. Yes, so I would agree with that. Hopefully you would agree with that too.